So we leave Victoria Harbour one bright September morning on the Coho ferry to Port Angeles. It takes 90 minutes to cross the Straits of Juan de Fuca and reach the United States. Our road trip takes us south through Washington State, visiting Mount Rainier and Mount St. Helens, before reaching Portland on the Columbia River. So here's our new Kia car, all ready to go, and we're excited to be seeing this part of the country for the first time.
The closest of the 18 so-called Cascadia volcanoes is hard to see from this road on account of the heavy forestation. Anyhow, we finally enter Mount Rainier National Park and get our first glimpse of the snow-covered peak. The weather looks very promising, and we have planned a spectacular hike.
Mount Rainier is massive at over 14,000 feet. It's a playground for Seattle residents, although this depiction of what they do is somewhat dated.
There is snow year-round at the top, with forests on the lower slopes. The Park Service have many huge lodges. Some are in very remote locations, and this is typical on both counts. The cheerful staff do a great job of handling endless questions from outdoor enthusiasts and tourists.
We sadly cancel our planned hike because of a necklace of cloud making visibility very low just at this altitude. It's been the same for 10 days, clear everywhere on the mountain except at this 5,400-foot altitude. The area is quite appropriately called Paradise. The wildflowers are really impressive, and we enjoy seeing so many of them this late in the season. The Cascadia volcanoes are active and are part of the Pacific Rim of Fire. Even so, everyone drives around quite nonchalantly.
The next day, we head for Mount St. Helens, which had a spectacular explosion in 1980. Our journey is in such contrast to the previous day on Mount Rainier. Clear skies and open vistas with no trees at all. Every tree was blown down by the 1980 explosion.
The Johnston Ridge Observatory looks more like a wartime bunker. It was built after 1980 and is at the end of the new road at 4,300 feet. The old road is far below and buried. The new road is a magnificent mountain road, and like every road we take on the whole trip, it is in perfect velvet smooth condition. Anyhow, below us now is a wilderness including 200-foot pumice cliffs and nearly impenetrable terrain. Elk are down there grazing on the fast regenerating vegetation. One wonders where all the seeds came from and how they could grow in such inhospitable conditions. No need to wonder about anything. The Park Service have all the answers in a highly animated presentation. An earlier eruption is clearly recorded in a period of very minimal tree growth, seen here in the hardly visible tree rings just after 1475.
The 1980 eruption left no trees to record anything, but there are plenty of photos, of course. This was a monster event for sure. However, fresh vegetation is doing well. The grey jays are back, and this little fellow,
whatever it is,
has lots of friends scurrying about the overlook. The tourists are back as well. This glassware in the gift shop was made using volcanic ash, which is very plentiful in these parts.
We take the obligatory selfie with a dramatic background. The whole experience proves to be very well worth the 100-mile round trip from the main highway. Portland, our next stop, is due south and actually over the Columbia River, so it's in Oregon. It is a rich city, as the river is a route for agricultural and forest products headed to Asian markets. Its downtown skyline is a great mix of old and new. High above the city on its western flank is Washington Park. The park is home to two famous gardens, a rose garden and a Japanese garden.
The rose garden is simply overwhelming in size and content. The Japanese garden is at least as good as any we have seen in Japan, and it is currently being expanded. The Zen garden has a raking pattern that boggles the mind. How do they do it? Photographers relish such subjects, but it's not easy to capture the serenity of a beautiful garden such as this when it is thronged with weekend crowds. The health and vigour of the trees here is very apparent.
Here's a tranquil corner with more trees than people just for a brief moment. Obviously, fall colours would be stunning on a visit in October. To get an idea of what will happen later, the seasonal change is brought about by digital manipulation, quicker than just waiting around. The 100-year-old Pittock mansion nearby was built by a newspaper baron. It has remarkably advanced bathrooms for the age. The whole place is so tastefully done without too much lavish excess. Probably a popular spot for weddings, as the landscaping and general ambience is very attractive. There are superb views over Portland to another Cascadia volcano that we plan to visit on this trip.
Portland has a public transit system to really be proud of. Travel anywhere, all day for just $5. Hotels are cheaper out at the airport, so we stay there, leave the car and travel to town on the transit system for a hassle-free day. One highlight for us is the so-called Saturday market, which we find in full swing on Sunday. There are 2 street bands today featuring the Australian didgeridoo, not what one usually expects accompanying guitar and drums. Kids' stuff is everywhere. There is even a splash park in September. Security makes its rules very clear, but cannabis seems totally unregulated everywhere we go on this US visit.
The market is a place for people watching. There's no shortage of opportunities to take in the full spectrum of local characters. These folk and their messages are totally ignored as far as we can tell, but the exercise of the First Amendment rights to free expression has long been treasured by Americans. The Portland Chinese Garden is modelled after ones we visited south of Shanghai 8 years ago. It is right downtown, and there is a dramatic contrast with the modern city skyline. We like the multitude of window designs on the exterior walls, which are such a unique feature of this garden's interface with the modern city.
Taking a tour is a good way to learn about the garden, which, in spite of its appearance, is only 16 years old. We do take a lot of photos. The lanterns would not normally be here, but they are left over from a fundraiser the previous evening. They add a lot to the atmosphere of the garden. Finally, we discover the tea room and go in for traditional treats. This is certainly a different-shaped moon gate. Whatever its symbolism or implied good fortune, we take a final picture anyway.
Such a great visit to something so lovingly and carefully constructed. Hard to believe it's all packed into one small city block. We drag ourselves away from Portland. It's a nice city with a lot of character. We travel due east along the Columbia River Valley with detours to see a power dam and then Mount Hood. Here is the valley. The Columbia River drainage basin is the size of France. The western part of the valley is heavily forested, with softwood and hardwood species that add much to the scenic beauty of the landscape. The river has 14 power dams. Nearly half the total U.S. hydraulic power generation is from this river basin.
The first dam upstream is the Bonneville Dam, which is as old as we are. There is only a 60-foot head of water at the dam. In spite of all appearances, dams are far from being environmentally benign. There is even vocal opposition expressed right here on our tour. Dams stop everything, not only water. There is a lock, of course, for ships to get agricultural exports to Portland. Salmon use a fish ladder on their annual migration.
Fish species counts are made at these windows. This is an official photo, as we see only one large fish and several smaller ones. We are just ahead of the main migration season. There are endless small rivers plunging down the cliffs of the Columbia Gorge. Nearby parking lots are packed as the whole area is very scenic. Another dam, the Dalles, comes into view, and then another waterfall high above the Columbia. As soon as we are out of the valley, Mount Hood dominates the skyline. Cars stop along this road as the volcano appears to totally block the exit. It's huge. The road goes all the way back to Portland. It circles the base of Mount Hood and passes lots of fruit orchards on the way. The roadside fruit outlets are of magnet. This one offers 9 named varieties of plums. We invest, of course. Out back there are orchards, but their dahlia garden really is stunning with Mount Hood in the background.
Now for the start of a completely different experience, as our route turns north across the river and out of the Columbia River Valley. The frequency of settlements drops abruptly, and we feel the need to have a full tank of gas. This station is large, considering its rural location. There are 12 pumps, which is a lot for rural fuel stations these days.
On the bleak, treeless uplands, the dominant growth species is the wind turbine. Absolutely no trees. This is at best dry ranchland, at worst it's a desert. Tumbleweed blows around and the vistas are so totally different from those we saw only an hour ago. The roads are in excellent condition, but they are not busy. We are simply blown away by the abrupt climatic change. Actually, when we get out of the car, we are literally blown away. It's bleak up here. This intrepid cyclist carried water and possibly no rain gear at all. It is clear why he made these choices, but why on earth did he elect to ride this road at all? Approaching Yakima, we see signs of failed agricultural ventures. In town, we see signs of societal failures as well.
We keep driving north and arrive at Ellensburg, which is a delightful town bubbling with civic pride. Looking along this commercial strip in Ellensburg, there is a forest of wind turbines way off in the distance. Such ribbon development of gas stations, fast food outlets and cheap motels is so common in the US. Sometimes the town core survives and is wonderfully restored. Such is the case with Ellensburg. The hardware store and the Wells Fargo Bank are so often the main anchors in these old towns, and here they are.
We discover a museum of local treasures. They have a linotype machine from the era when Grandpa Taylor was the typesetter on such a machine for the Beverly Guardian over 100 years ago. We see this exhibit on the very day that the Guardian closed its doors after 160 years of publication.
There are fruit farms and roadside markets again. A cidery smell pervades the air everywhere. Clearly, irrigation has turned the desert into a productive orchard. Large wooden boxes of fruit are the dominant cargo on the roads. The quantities of fruit being transported are enormous. What impresses us the most at the roadside markets is the quality and the variety of the offerings.
On a slightly sour note, we find the prices quite high, but that doesn't seem to deter eager customers at all. We're included in that group, of course. Our route has taken us into the mountains southeast of Seattle. This lovely Bavarian-style town is Leavenworth. The makeover of a faded mining, railroad and lumber town was started in 1962. The result is quite overwhelming. Sure, it looks phony, but so do actual Bavarian towns. There is skiing in season, and beer is never out of season. Just to check the authenticity of goods in the stores, we read a few labels. Full marks all around. Everything is made in China. This is a destination at any time, but who could resist Christmas in such surroundings? This is a borrowed photo, of course.
We're on the road again for the final leg of our trip, which takes us into Canada via the Seattle area, where Boeing have made aircraft since 1916. As we set off, there is not a map to be seen, although we do admit to carrying a couple. Map reading used to be an essential skill on such road trips, but not anymore. We are using a Garmin global positioning system all the way.
The first part of today's drive is through pleasant mountainous terrain. We have reservations at the Future of Flight experience run by Boeing at their Everett facility just north of Seattle. Whilst waiting for the tour time, there's lots to do at the reception building. The roof deck is a good starting place for a first look at the assembly building in which the actual tour will take place. This photo is from Boeing. They have the advantage of being able to get higher for a better shot. The assembly building at the top left is the largest building in the world by volume. It is the third largest by floor area after the Flower Auction Hall near Amsterdam and the Tesla electric car plant in the US. Bags, cameras and smartphones are not allowed on the tour, but there are no restrictions in the reception building, which is packed with interesting displays. Commercial aircraft have become very large at the same time as the seat space has got smaller. This is a good seat, just so long as you're able to climb into it. No joke, the access is really quite difficult. Modern civilian aircraft designs have for some time used two engines. Everyone takes a photo here to record how massive the engines are when you get up close.
There is just time for the gift shop and then on to the bus that will take us to the assembly building. This photo therefore needs some explanations, as we clearly have a bag and a camera, which are not allowed. This is actually a green screen shot by Boeing. They take your photo and post it online. You can retrieve it at home and paste it to a choice of backgrounds, also supplied electronically by Boeing. We chose the 747 assembly bay as background because we actually visited this exact viewing deck during the tour.
Boeing promotes the mantra that if it's not Boeing, then we're not going. What we saw firsthand sure makes a very strong case to support their argument. So, how much does all this painstaking perfection cost? We paid $20 each, but maybe the question was about something else. The latest 789 Dreamliner actually goes for $300 million. One final thought. All planes assembled here take their first flights over the snow-capped Cascadia volcanoes we have just visited on our road trip. What a nice backdrop for Boeing's promotional material.
It is our 60th wedding anniversary. We have dinner at Anthony's Seafood Grill in Alderwood. A great end to an exciting and varied 10-day road trip. The Kia went well, the plan went well, and we never got lost thanks to the Garmin, although some of the quirky directions did threaten to turn the whole experience into a mystery tour sometimes.